All right, Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to Big Book Compendium presents Common Solution Workshop. Continue on step 4. I'm going to start off with a cool story that I heard a long time ago. So there's this old Cherokee, and he's teaching his grandson about life. And he tells the young boy, he says, "A fight is going on inside me." He said to the boy, it's a terrible fight. It's between two wolves. One is evil, who is anger, envy, sorrow, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, pride, and superiority and ego. The other is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, kindness, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. The same fight is going on you inside of you and every other person. The boy looks at the grandfather and asked, which wolf will win? And the Cherokee simply says, the one you feed. So if we sit back and just look at our old life, I'm not, forget drinking. We're way past drinking and using and all the other shit. We're talking about emotional, mental instincts and what's going on in our, with our thinking. So if you look back at our life, at our old life, let's just say, we got resentments. When we got a resentment, and what did we do? We would seek revenge. We got mad and we assaulted someone. We would get angry, slam a door, punch a wall. We told the person off just to feel better. We would gossip, lie, judge, just to feel what we thought was fulfillment. And we got the things we wanted, and we didn't care who got hurt in our path. That's how we lived. Is that the legacy we want? Is that do we want that etched on our tombstone? I don't think that would be a very nice tombstone. Here lies such and such. He was a liar, cheating, thief, blah, blah, blah. But it's the person we want. We don't want to be that no more. The legacy I know that I want is best said by one of my favorite Buddhist writers, Jack Kornfield. And what Jack Kornfield says, and this is often quoted to Buddha, it's actually Jack Kornfield. In the end, only 3 things matter most: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how deeply you let go. So, this is the journey we need to be on. We resent others and harmed others, so we need to learn to love. We lived in fear, and we need to learn to live like it says, gently. And we hold on to everything. We need to learn to let go, or we just need to let go. But we need to make right with all that stuff too, people we hurt, so we can be free. And we have the joy of accomplishing this in 4 through 9. You got to remember what the book says. What often takes place, in a few months, could seldom be accomplished by years of self-discipline, years of some type of philosophy or anything else. The steps are rocket power. And, I was wound up very tight. I was very wound up tight. And then I'm going to show you a picture of how willing I was to open up, right? This is a good representation of me. That's me right there. This is how willing I was to open up, The last thing I want to do was open up to someone. And this is nail on the head. It's like every time you peel away something, there's something else there to protect it. As much as I didn't want that, that's who I was. Let's go to page 64. So it says, therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. So we talked about resentments last week, went there, and we kind of go back a little bit to look at all, how this ties together. Excuse me. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Of course, right? Taking commercial inventory is a fact-finding, fact-facing process. A business which takes no regular inventory, I just wrote the same thing. It is an effort to discover the truth about stock and trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. I would underline get rid of promptly without regret, because that's the one thing the steps will give us to do through the directions. That's the one thing we could never do, is get rid of something promptly without regret. And if the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. So I'm sure some of you in here have done commercial inventory. I have had jobs off and on over the years working for grocery stores, and it was always something you didn't look forward to. Excuse me. Yeah, it's allergies. The reason we take inventory, and we look at it from a grocery store perspective, to find out what's selling and what is not, and something, and what is not selling to get rid of. So we can kind of compare that to the steps. Let's say Robert and I have worked in a grocery store together, and he's the boss, and he's been mentoring me in that store, and he goes, "Well, we're doing inventory tonight. Here's your," he gives me a list, and the list says exactly what's on the shelves. 20 cases of Coca-Cola was put on the shelves, 16 cases of Doritos, and whatever else there is. And he goes, "I want you to write down next to each item how much is left." Okay, so I do all that, I fill it out, and I go back and talk to him about it, just like I would do a fifth step. And I sit there and I tell him, "Okay, well, we have one bag of Doritos left on the shelf, but we have RC Cola, we delivered 24, we got 24 left." And it goes all through like that. So what he tells me now is same thing like the sponsor tells us in the fifth step. Now I want you to go remove off the shelf what's not working. Get rid of the RC Cola, get rid of the ones that aren't selling, and we'll put something in there that replace it with something. This is the same thing we're doing here. Same exact thing. As I'm looking at this inventory, I look at myself, I go over it with someone, and I look at the stuff that doesn't work, and I let it go. I'm going to put up a slide here which compares inventory, commercial versus personal. So if you look at it, business is a fact finding, personal is searching, same thing. Fact facing, ours is fearless, same thing. We're facing facts, same thing. That's what fearless is. So truth is business and ours is moral, same thing. Ours is about stock and trade, right? I mean, there's about stock and trade. Ours is about our thinking. So searching is fact finding and fearless is fact facing. Moral is relating to the rights and wrongs of human character. Truth or honest. Here's another way to look at it, step 4. We made a fact finding, fact facing, honest inventory of ourselves. Look at the object for both. Same thing, damaged or unsaleable goods, right? I guarantee my goods were not sellable, to get rid of them promptly without regret, both. And then there's a stock and trade that is damaged. Ours is resentment, fear, and harms. So it gets real there. It's real quick. So, step 4, inventory, helps us reveal our damaged, our damaged goods. And so we can get rid of them promptly without regret. And when we eliminate something you don't want, you rid yourself of it. It means to dispel or displace, remove, eliminate, or you can say eradicate it. And that's what 6 and 7 is about. So step 4 is the beginning of this removal process and freeing so we can be free from something we no longer works for us. Let's go back to the book. It says, we did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us. We considered as common manifestations, common signs. So last week, we talked about what the spiritual malady is, which is this inability to connect to the spirit within us. Step 2 talks about, page 55 of the big book, the great reality is deep down within us. God is within us. I mean, I believe in the last couple hundred years, maybe last 100 years, we've really started to understand what is this thing inside of us, and we still barely know, right? But it's the inability to connect to this guidance center inside of us, the spirit, whatever you want to call it. And the common manifestations, signs of that malady are resentment, harms, guilt, fear, such misconduct. Now, obviously, the harms create the guilt, but they're both on there. But the cause of those common manifestations is misdirected instincts. And the end result is the malady, as I mentioned, it's the illusion we're separated from God. We can't be separated from anything we've already had our whole life. So if we have something inside of us, what tries to convince me it's not there? Ego, edging God out. And that causes doubt in God, doubt. It's the same, it's no difference if I have ego, I want to be separated. I don't like Jason that much. I want to be separated from him. I don't want to talk to him anymore. I'm going to find ways. Anybody like that. That's the way it was. So ego tells us we're separated from everybody. And so the end result of the malady is this illusion we're separated from God. If that malady is left untreated, we will seek out ease and comfort. It comes at once by whatever you do. Drugs, alcohol, sex, food, whatever it might be. But the remedy for that malady is steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's top secret stuff. But the result of that remedy is we start out mentally and physically. All right. So back to the book. This book is loaded with promises, directions, and also conditions. And a condition is like a prerequisite, a requirement to achieve something, right? Like your condition for you to play on the team is to make the team, to try out, right? And make the team. That's the condition. You can go further and say, you got to run around the field 80 times, whatever, to make the team. That's the condition to making it. That, they're going to give us some conditions in here. And this paragraph has some very, very, very important conditions. And it starts off with one right away. We went back to our lives. That's the condition. How far do we go? What does that look like? An inventory. How far back you can remember. Guys always ask me, hey, well, what about the little girl in the schoolyard that threw rocks at me? And my response is, why are you bringing her up? Put her down. Go back as far back as you can. And even, people, I sponsor men, I sponsor women, and they'll, everyone's different and they all have different excuses why they can't. Oh, I don't really, have those resentments anymore. Oh, so you're cool with the people? Oh, no, hell no, they're dead to me. That's not what the solution, right? But as far as back as you can go. As far back. If you have any questions about that, we can talk about it after the group. But look what it says that nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. That's another condition, right? Thoroughness. They call that in step 9 promises, painstaking. So it's to look over in a complete and careful manner, right? If you get like a expensive gift or something like that on Christmas, and thoroughness would be make sure it's not broken. You can look at everything there is. Maybe there's some mechanics, repair people in here. What it means to be thorough, especially if you're a mechanic, right? But it's to look over some complete and careful manner. Honesty. The definition of honesty that I love, is the awareness of where I'm at. Because it's self-honesty. Do I have resentment? Do I have fear? A guy told me the other day, I got a resentment. I said, congratulations. And he's like, what? And I said, congratulations, because you are aware you have a resentment. He's doing the program. So he got what I was saying. But And I mean, it's not the exact kindest thing to say, but so that's 3 important conditions for inventory. Go back to our lives. Number 1, thoroughness and honesty. And there's another one that we read last week. It says we got it on paper. So all 4 are important. Put it on paper, went back to our lives, thoroughness, honesty. It's the 4 conditions of written inventory. And, I mean, the reason why so many people wind up in trouble, and I mean in trouble out there crazy or get loaded again, is they're not thorough and honest. All you got to do is read page bottom of 72. And, newcomers try to keep facts about themselves. It will tell you everything there. But, thorough is linked to another powerful promise, in conditions. You think about thoroughness and honesty, right? Is rarely have I seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. It asks us to be fearless and thorough from the very start. So through all the steps, if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, right? Thorough. When we're finished, we consider it carefully. The fear apparent was this world and its people were often quite wrong. Look at this. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. That's all we could do on our best day, with all the stuff we're creating in our head. The best thing to do is conclude another person is wrong. That person made me angry. That person is wrong. That person, question. That person made me angry. It took me years to realize that another person can't make me angry. None of you can make me angry. The only person that can make me angry is myself. Think about that. If you have a 12 and 12, I'll read one sentence out of it. You probably know where I'm going with this. Page 90, if some of you know where I'm going. It's probably one of the top 5, 12 and 12, good stuff in it. It says, page 90, it is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, that's column 2, there is something wrong with us, no matter what the cause. Spiritual axiom. And you could say axiom in the 30s older dictionaries just says truth. The spiritual truth. So it's a spiritual truth because outside spirituality, you've never heard that before. But notice it says every time, not sometimes, not kind of, not here and there, every time. And the only thing that could be wrong with anyone in this entire universe is my thinking. And when you do 4 and 5, you see the spiritual truth of that statement. So the essence of living spiritual is we stop blaming other people. Blame has to go. We cease blaming others. It's ceasing blaming other people is the key to enlightenment. It's the key to enlightenment. Back to the book. The usual outcome was that people continue to wrong us and we stayed sore. Very important there. We stayed angry. Like I said last week, there's no justified resentments, no matter what someone did to you, because we stay sore. We get hurt. Sometimes it was remorse, and then we were sore ourselves. That's self-pity. It's an ugly place to be. It's when the last person left to resent is us. But the more we fought, what's interesting I want to say about self-pity is I'm not a huge proponent about people putting themselves down in their 4 steps, but if you have to, you do it on there. But because the whole 3rd column is about us. But if a person, some of you sponsors will recognize this as a person, we all have people we sponsor over the years that go in and out, come back, in and out. And the one thing that starts to happen, the more inventories they do, is they start putting themselves down there more because they found the bitter end of self-pity. So I've known people that spent years going in and out, And it wasn't until I got self-pity, that was my condition. It wasn't until I got self-pity that I really wanted this program. I was really resentful of myself. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seen the win, or most of the triumph is short-lived. I mean, every war, they have parades and stuff and celebrations. I remember the Iraq war, they did like a thing on a ship and it lasted like 10 minutes. It was back to business again. I said, moments of triumph are short-lived. So last week we looked at resentment inventory. Tonight we'll look at harm inventory. And, you know, the book says if we were to live, we need to be free of anger. Is that possible to be free of anger? And the book also states that if we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, you know, sanity has returned. Is that possible? And it even suggests at night, a deep question, were we kind and loving towards all? Not kind and loving towards all. Is that possible? But it directs us to pause when agitated and doubtful, to pause so we don't harm another person. Is that possible? They're all possible, but there's another promise. Love and tolerance of others is our code. A lot of people will say, I don't get that. I don't think it's possible. But it is. The other one is self-seeking will slip away. Now we're getting somewhere. Self-seeking, so you, on the left hand, you have selfishness. It's not moving, right? It's just selfish. It's just stagnant thought. Self-seeking is it separates and goes self-seeking. I'm taking action on it and it's jumping around, going after things. So self-seeking is selfishness in action. So selfishness is taking most of my own needs with lower thought of nothing of others at all. Taking most of my own needs with lower thought of others. Self-seeking is pursuing those needs. And we know we don't, it's that so self-seeking is a harm. Another word for harm. Harming others will slip away. I mean, does that sound possible? I mean, slip away. The mind changes. We see things different. We change the way you look at things. The thing you look at change. I can honestly tell you, without doing a harm inventory, it's not possible. You know, a good way to think. I mean, so we looked at in our resentment inventory, we look at a lot of people, and we might see some of them again in our harms. I mean, our fear, and of course, we will see some of them in our sex conduct as well. And now we look at a lot of them in our harms, coming from every which direction. Some we hurt physically, mentally, verbally. We were dishonest to. Some we stole from. We hurt lots of people. And I said this before, you know, the only way, you know, my way isn't the only way. As far, I'm talking about inventory here. This is, I'm not reinventing the wheel, trying to reinvent the wheel. It's just, if, you know, I said from the beginning, I want you to be open-minded because there'll be some different ideas of inventory thrown out, especially this harms inventory. Some people never heard of it before. But people often say there's no harm inventory in the big book. And I think it's not there because it's kind of obvious. You know, we harm people. We need to do it. The real question is not should or shouldn't I do it? It's why wouldn't I do it? And how the question is, when I've talked to people, is, you know, how much further do you want to go? How freer do you want to be? I'll be very transparent. I did lots of bad stuff, and that's not an ego bragging thing. I'm just being transparent. I hurt lots of people. I stole, I robbed, I was violent, I was dishonest, I was a dirtbag. You know, I was a junkie and a drunk that didn't care how I got it. And my ego wanted to be successful at whatever I did when I never was. But not only did I hurt those people around me, I hurt people I never knew. I can't, I can't imagine not doing harm inventory. And the thing I realized, I might harm one person. I might have a resentment against one person, but it will manifest into a bunch of harms against that person. I'll give you an example, make it easier to figure out. So my brother, he's like perfect in my eyes. I mean, straight. Well, he wasn't a good athlete. I was, but he was the straight A student. He was what my dad wanted and everything like that. And when I started using drugs, he was just like looked down upon me, and I just got huge resentments for his attitude. And after that, it was like the harm. It wasn't just a response. My response to that was, one thing I want to explain, and I'll mention it later, is when I have a resentment, my instincts are hurt or threatened. I'm going to satisfy my instincts by harming somebody. I'm going to feel better to harm. And so I would do that with my brother. I would harm him, and I probably harmed him for every one resentment 10 times more harms. So I need to look at every single one of those. And my sponsorship line, I'm from, they just do harm inventory. And it wasn't I didn't know if you shouldn't or shouldn't do it. We just did it. And my sponsees do it. And I got lots of guys from other sponsorship lines who either go back out or switch sponsors, and they come to me and ask me to take them to the steps. And like, I do harm inventory before, and they're like, "Oh, really? I never did that." And and after they do it, a couple guys, I mean, a lot of guys told me that I went way deeper. And I've had guys who still have sponsors who come to the book studies that I do, and they hear me talk about harm inventory, and they contact me and say, "I don't want to get rid of my sponsor, but I want to do a harm inventory." And I never forget, one guy told me, he says he felt like he finally had closure on something. That guy had 27 years of sobriety. Finally had closure on something. And I'm just asking everyone to be open-minded towards this. So let's look at what a harm is. It's to cause physical or mental damage to another. Now, that can be deliberately or not deliberately. So when it's deliberate, we know what that means, right? It's an act of, blame and revenge, from resentment, blame and revenge. That's what was our thing. When it's not deliberate, it means the stranger, it's just someone caught in our path of destruction. Maybe someone we robbed, or we stole from them, or we hustled someone out of some money. We didn't even know. Maybe they were just at the wrong place at the wrong time, like a DUI type situation or whatever it is. Let's look at what the book says about harms. Let's go to page 18. I'm going to look at what does this world look like? And this is the first thing I read in the book that kind of ripped my spine out and showed it to me, so to speak. I felt that way. It says, page 18, an illness of this sort, we have come to believe it is an illness, involves those about us, and no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, I'll feel sorry for him, and no one is hurt. People go up to I don't think a person goes up to someone with cancer and says, "Knock off this cancer stuff." And that doesn't happen. But they're not. We are sympathetic, show compassion. We're sad for them. People aren't like that with us, right? But not so the alcoholic illness, for it goes alienation of all things worthwhile in life. All things worthwhile in life. To alienate means to kill or destroy in large numbers. That tells me there's a lot of harms involved. How many things were annihilated in your life? Think of a resentment where more people got hurt, right? Look at the next sentence here. Think about what's valuable in your life: kids, spouse, family, recovery. And we can easily destroy that stuff. Look what it says: it engulfs all lives who touch the sufferer. There's something called the circle of engulfment. And the circle of engulfment, what that is, so years ago, I had a girlfriend, and we used to just go crazy and throw things at each other and get in fights and all sorts of stuff. And one night it went bad, and it turned into a domestic situation. And I was in blackout, but there was about 4 of our friends witnessed the whole thing. The cops got called. I fought the cops, of course, when they got there. And I fought the second round, the cops, when they got there. And she called my parents. She called her parents. At the end of the day, I harmed her. I harmed the 4 witnesses from seeing what happened. I harmed harm the probably 7 cops, that's 12, and I harmed the parents, engulfs all lives that touch and suffer. It's a pretty indication that we have harmed people. Our harms just don't go from one life to the next, you know. I'm sorry, they go from one life to the next. And I love when you hear newcomers say all the time, the only person I ever harmed is me. That's impossible. It brings misunderstanding. I mean, no one, only people who understands us is us. You know, the biggest misunderstanding is we can't comprehend there's life beyond the anger. Look what it says, fierce resentment. Another word for fierce is violent resentment, right? If you have violent resentment, that's a harm. Financial insecurity, you know, one of the biggest driving forces of resentment and harm and fear is material items, right? If your mind's wrapped up in material security, my mind is going to be very discontented and short and angry that I don't have what I want. That leads to being dishonest and harming people. Disgusted friends and employers. You know, we know what disgusted means. You know, did your friends ever disapprove of your actions leading to resentment before or after harm? We heard lots. I mean, we heard people and those, you know, who were trying to help us a lot of times. How many times have we hurt someone trying to help us just by the things we said, by pushing them away? My nephew's doing that to me right now, and it hurts, but I got to let it happen because he's a junkie right now. You know, I mean, how many second and third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14 chances that people give us? I mean, think of the things that we did and people kept us around. Warped lives of blameless children. Were you the product of an alcoholic home? Were you one of those blameless children? And did you ever say, I'll never, you know, do what, you know, to my kids what my dad or mom did? I'll never treat my kids like that. I will never do that in front of my kids. I will never, you know, leave my kids at home for hours. I won't do that. And, you know, and what happens is we do the same thing, you know. And I've been sponsoring guys for a long time, and I've been around tons of dope heads my whole life. I was a counselor, I've seen it all. And what disgusts me when alcoholics act like we're the victims. Our children are the innocent victims. And some of us, some of our kids, I guarantee you there's someone in here right now is waiting to reconnect with their kids. And we can. But the thing is, some of us have harmed our kids so bad, it takes years, it takes many amends till it comes out. And for some of us, I've seen this happen before too, is they think it's going great with their kids, and their kids, you know, all of a sudden go from, you know, young adults to older adults, and it gets brought back on us again. So and it reminds us, wow, I really did, you know, we don't realize till they get older. Sad wives. Again, how many second, third chances do we get? You know, parents, remember the look on your parents' face. You know, the one thing is I didn't realize how often I robbed my mom of her emotional security, because my mom had a men's story. She says, I'm just glad no one's scraping off the sidewalk and I'm not getting a call at 3 o'clock in the morning. Every day I robbed her of her emotional security. Every day. I didn't even think about that. It says anyone can increase the list. We are not going to keep going. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who aren't fake. There are many. It doesn't say a few. This shows us the you know, the destruction that we caused, and we have some rebuilding to do. You know, stuff is rarely talked about like that in meetings. People would rather talk about, you know, the DUIs and, you know, running into the telephone pole and alcoholic seizures and overdoses and stuff than talk about the pain we caused on people, kids, parents, you know, spouses. You know, it said, you know, the thing about it is, you know, that circle of engulfment where all those people get involved. That's the thing you need to think about. How many people walked into that engulfment? You know, so that I'm going to talk about resentment and harm. The main difference between resentment and harm is, you know, resentment's a thought, harm is an action. The difference is with resentment, I mentioned a minute ago, our instincts are hurt, they're threatened. If my pride's threatened, and I need to go fulfill that and do something about it so my instincts feel better. Meaning instincts either stay in our mind or we satisfy them by hurting another in conflict. The other difference with resentment is resentments are selfish, harms are self-seeking. And if I stay selfish long enough in resentment, some people do it for years and rarely harm people, but then the bomb explodes. Yeah, we become self-seeking, we hurt people. The domino effect. How many times have you been, think about when you were using, or maybe you came back or went back out and you think you're doing pretty good, and one instant of harms numerous people in one night. You look and go, holy crap, I harmed the whole family, I harmed the neighbors. That's the stuff we need to look at. Just because someone says hi to you doesn't mean you don't, that and smiles at you doesn't mean that you don't owe them an amends. You hear that too a lot in the program. I heard a guy say, I don't owe amends to my dad, I don't think anymore because we're cool. I mean, come on. Because when we harm people, we have guilt. That's the other thing. We know with guilt, we know we're at fault. Because when we resent someone, right, we blame everybody else. It's never our fault with resentment. But it's when we harm people, we have guilt. We know who's at fault. We know we're at fault. We want to get rid of that. And guilt turns, it's the blame on us. And it's one of the main reason, one of the 5 reasons I would say we do harm inventory, why it's so important. Because guilt is such a powerful emotion. And it's that deep shame of committing a past wrong. Think of the term eating me up inside. So guilt leads to similar things that are uglier, sharper, and more, make you bleed a little more. Remorse, regret, self-loathing, low self-esteem, self-pity, misery, the lack of, destruction of self-confidence and depression. So what does guilt convince me? That there's nothing we can do about it. That's what guilt says us. It's too late. Too much time has passed. I'm a dirtbag. I'm a piece of crap. I'll never be different. There's no way to fix me. You hear that all the time. That's the victim mode. So guilt is not a necessary response to one's past action. It's a present moment restriction. And where do we connect to God? Right now, present. I cannot connect to God if my mind's filled with guilt because I'm looking over my shoulder. And no amount of guilt can ever undo the past. So guilt has one of 2 outcomes. It can drown you until you're useless and push you to fix it. And you achieve the freedom to get past guilt. So, to achieve that, to fix it, the freedom, we must move past it. We must do inventory. We must discuss it with another, especially harm inventory, let it go and to make amends. Or we can drown in guilt. But, making amends is the final piece to get rid of guilt. But if you are, and we'll talk about that in amends, if you are full of guilt, then it's time to take some action. And the harm inventory is that. I'm going to put up the inventory sheets for this. We looked at inventory last week. The harm inventory, it's really going to show us how our selfish behavior played out in our life. We start looking at the resentment inventory. Just, it looks like it does in the book, but on a, it's like a template. Who I resent, why, what instincts. And the harm inventory looks like that. Let's see if I can put them side by side. That might work. Oh, no, it didn't work. It did that instead. Well, that's where I want to be anyways. We'll look at the harm and the inventory next to each other, right? So with the harm inventory, I'm looking at let's say I harmed my father because fist fight, beat him up, said, I'm not going to put one thing, I'm going to put a bunch of things down. And someone's unmuted in here. So basically, I'm going to write down what I did. And did it affect my personal relations with my father? Absolutely. Did it affect my self-esteem? Made me feel low every time after I did it. So it didn't, I went in there with high self-esteem and I would come out low. And pride, emotional security is affected. My ambitions, because ambitions are huge in harm inventory. You start to see, yeah, they're not my life anymore. And then the action parts of it, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. Hold on 1 second. Someone is unmuted here. Give me 1 second. Anyone seeing when it's unmuted? I keep hearing someone talking. Maybe it's just me. I'm hearing voices again. All right. If someone can figure that out, be great. So I'm going to read out the 12 and 12 real quick. Page 80. And it's at the bottom of that page. Page 80, 12 and 12. So it states, we might ask ourselves what we mean when we say we have harmed other people. What kinds of harms do people do to one another anyway? To define them, the word harm in a practical way, and the big book uses this all through it, we might call it a result of instincts in collision, which cause physical, mental, and emotional damage to people. Remember in the big book, and it says, people, hurt us, and people step on our toes, and we retaliated. Instincts in collision. And it's, we step on their toes, they retaliate, and then you go back and hurt them again. Look at this. It says, if our tempers are constantly bad, that's a condition, we arouse anger and jealousy. We arouse anger in others. If we lie, cheat, or deprive others, that's dishonesty, not only of their worldly goods, but of their emotional security and peace of mind as well. We really issue them an invitation to become contentious and vengeful. So they hurt me and I'm the victim all of a sudden, even though I started this. If our sex conduct is selfish, we may excite jealousy, misery, strong desire, retaliating kind. That's stuff we go into sex inventory. So here's the thing is, if my desire for personal relationship is too great, it may cause me to harm another human being. If I live by pride, I'm going to be jealous. What do people think? If I have high self-esteem, I'm going to be patronizing and condescending. And low self-esteem is going to always want me to prove myself. And emotional security may cause me, have that outburst of rage. And if I need something, my material instinct will drive me to get it at all costs, right? My desire for sex may cause me to be dishonest. So let's do a twist on Mr. Brown here. We're going to do it towards a harm. So we know he has attention to my wife. He has a resentment. And let's give an interesting one here. I'm Mr. Brown. I'm whoever the guy is here, and I'm talking to Jason standing next to me, and hey, look at Brown over there. He's looking in my wife's direction. Check him out. But in reality, what I don't see is there's a female friend of hers waving at her in the direction I don't see, and I'm immediately blaming it on a person, right? So what did I do? I went and got in Brown's face and said, hey, you don't talk to my wife, you don't get near her, and I come at him. I don't physically harm him, but I do that. So basically, I threatened Mr. Brown. You got to remember is I could sit there and resent him for 3 years because of it. And 3 years later, I could come at him and say, what a dirtbag he is, what he did to my wife 3 years ago at the Christmas party. And now it's a harm. But who's been harmed the whole time? Me, for 3 years. So I'm going to put on here, who did I harm? Mr. Brown. What did he do? He's, I'm sorry, what did I do? Is I told them what a dirtbag he is, told them off. Just let it all out. And we justify that. No, we're not justifying anymore. Did it affect my personal relations with him? Yep. We're not friends ever, but we have a cubicle next to each other at the office. My self-esteem is high and still is high from the beginning. Did it affect my pride? Everyone else saw it. That's why I went and told them off. Did it affect my emotional security? You bet you. Did it affect my social security ambitions? Oh yeah, because now I asked to be moved away. Mr. Brown asked to leave the office. He quit the job and all that stuff. Was I dishonest? Not really, because there's no dishonesty in there, but was I self-seeking? Yeah. Was I frightened? Yeah. That's how easy harm inventory is. You're just looking at your harms, but you might have to look at your response to things, and an easier way to look at it is column 1 is, who did I injure? Mentally, spiritually, emotionally, whatever. Whom did I injure? What was the injury I caused? What was I trying to satisfy in the third column? And what was the end result? So remember with the third column, right? It asks us to disregard the other person's involvement entirely, right? And we're disregarding the first 2 columns, put in our minds the wrongs others had done, this column, and disregard the other person. That leaves me just to look at this, my mistakes. All these are my mistakes. These are my shortcomings. These are my defects of character. These are the exact nature of my wrongs. Remember, this is not just a wrong you're admitting. This is the exact nature, the characteristics of your wrongs, right? Self-seeking. And frightened's always there because it's a state of fear I'm in. So this tells my story, as far as gatherings harms goes, route the ones that bother you the most, the ones you remember, right? Once you've done that, take your resentment sheet and see which resentments you took action on. And you'll see more harms. You'll go, oh shit, that's what I was told to do. And also it's 10 more harms to write down. Also, look at your harm inventory and you will know stuff that is a result of resentment. Put those in resentments. We're trying to hit it from all directions here. I'm going to show you guys. So I had primers for each thing you'll see each week. Last week we had the one you could write out the, grudge list. So I have one here. Give me 1 second to change this up. Oops, this one. Oops. There it goes. Our grudge list. Grudge list, the primer sheet is, so this is a good one to use, and it's also is good for the sex inventory too. So it's where you take the word dishonesty and you define it. So dishonesty is the act of lying, cheating, deceiving, and stealing, right? So you change it to who, list of people you lied to, list of people you cheated on, list of people you deceived and stole. Well, you might not remember everyone you lied to, but there's some deep lies, So lying is a deliberately speak falsely, fabrication of truth. We know what cheated means. It's the unethical, disloyal methods to get something you want. Now, if it's sexual, say that for your sex conduct. If it's more cheating on taxes and cheating people on money, it goes on harms. This is just phishing. All this primer is phishing. And deceiving means to mislead a person to get what you want. Now that can be with sex, but that can be with money too, right? Stealing. Here we go. You could steal someone's wife away. That's one thing, but stealing also someone's property. Intention. I always say this: it doesn't matter if you borrowed money from your mom and didn't pay her back, or took it off her dresser. They're both the same thing, stealing, right? In any case, any of these deal with, just fill it out and then you save the ones for sex, put in sex conduct. This is a really good primer, and then you move them over to your harms. Someone gave something like this one to me not long ago, and I filled it out and it worked really well. So somebody. Oh, there it is. Someone's unmuted. That's all right. So basically, let me get back to where I was. Oh yeah, let's go back to this thing here. So this kind of sums it up a little bit towards where we're going with this, and share the screen again. This is an archer, you know, and how many times you say, why do I do the things I did? Why did I say that? There's something in our mind that drives us to do the things we do. That's the truth. So this archer, you know, surrounding him is a world of people, right? Now, the bow the archer has represents our mind, our self-centeredness, our selfishness, our insanity. The arrow represents physical harm. I mean, it's physical harm you get by an arrow. And what happens, here's what happens. And this is the way we lived our life. We grab the bow and we hold on to this bow and we start adding an arrow to it. And we walk around for years just holding this arrow wherever we go, pointing at people. You know, everywhere we go, that arrow is ready to go and people don't, you know, and we pull back and we let it fly. Boom, that person, that person, that person. What's really pulling the bow? See, the archer represents our instincts. Our archer is driven by pride and self-esteem and personal relations and sex, all that stuff. You know, and when you ask, here's the thing about it is when you ask your mind, if you know, back when you're that crazy, what the problem is, it never says, I'm glad you asked when you were a child. No, it doesn't say that. It says, go tell the person how you feel. Go prove yourself. Tell her, you know, be a man. Yell at them, be right. And just like the archer, it points outside itself to fix the problem. That's all we're doing is point outside ourselves. I never once said to myself that my pride, my sexual relations, it was always blame and revenge. So the spirit needs to become the archer. The spirit needs to become the archer. So we can be driven by love rather than hate, and compassion rather than resentment, and patience rather than anger, peace rather than fear, humility rather than pride, you know, hope rather than despair, freedom rather than guilt. And when we become aware of our instincts, we see these things differently, and we can finally put down the bow for good. And the one thing, this hypothetical story is, most people always had that bow in their hands for a long time, and they realize they put in there, and they think that, you know, I can put down the arrow, but I never put down the bow. No, we put it down. You know, I said when, you know, I said when this began a few weeks ago, I said it when we did the instincts, I said when we did resentment, I'm saying it tonight. The Albert Einstein quote, the most important decision you have to make is, do I live in a friendly or hostile universe? Do I want to live in a friendly, hostile universe? Do I want to give away love, or I want to give away anger? We either react from a place of anger or respond from a place of love. And the ability to take conflict and end it with love is the most powerful thing you will ever be a part of. And, you know, when we fight anything, all we've done is join forces with what created the problem in the first place. We're joining forces with created that problem. And within each, you know, within each one of us, there's something much more going on. Like I said at the beginning, we're barely tapping into it. It's, you know, so many times throughout, you know, my life, I found myself reacting to situations instead of taking a step back and deciding to respond in a calm manner. I didn't know what that was. And when we change the way, what happens is we change the way we talk to people. When we find that calm, collective manner, when we finally reach there, you know, they say when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. The way we react to people changes. We change the way we talk to people. We think what we say rather than saying what we think. We stop trying to be right all the time. Do you want to be right or do you want to be free? You know, we stop needing to get the last word in. And we discover that the greatest gift we have is this pause button. Pause button. And, before I was told this years ago, before you say something you'll regret, pause and ask yourself, before you open your mouth to something stupid, I'll say, ask yourself these 3 questions. Are my words going to be true? Are my words going to be kind? And are they necessary? Are my words going to be true? Are they going to be kind? And are they necessary? That's the deepness of this. So, we have the steps to get all stuff out of the way. It's what, this is about oneness with God. Let's go to the bottom of 65. It says, we turn back to our list. That's our 4th step. For it held the key to the future. So does that mean if I don't do my 4th step, I don't have a future? I don't know. But the key is a means to access. All I can say, if we don't do it, all I can say is the best chance for survival, long-term recovery, beating this deadly illness. But you hear AA members all the time say it's the dreaded 4th step of the old timer says to the newcomer when they walk in the door, oh, yeah, that 4th step is going to beat you up and spit you out. It's like, what? Probably because, it's true. Yeah. Does it rehash events that we would rather not have to recall? Yes. Does it, do we look at disturbing things we did to people we love? Yes. Does it do we get exposed to ourselves, so to speak, that we did those things to push people away, but really wanted them around? Yeah. Does it expose secrets that only we knew about, we tell someone else? Yes. It definitely does not seem like the key to the future. But this will take us inside to see this stuff. And to remove it puts us in that place. So we're prepared to look at life we're prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle, as the book says. So if we look at something from a different angle, we call that a different point of view. And we see something from a different point of view, it changes the way we look at things. And here's what happens when we look at it from a different angle. We begin to see the world as people dominated us, really dominated us. We begin to see see what we created, and that's our problems. Our problems were of our own making. So we stop pointing the fingers at others, we start pointing at ourselves. It usually happens in 5. You go, boom. In that state, the wrongdoings of others, fancy real, had power to actually kill. Fancy means driven from the word fantasy. It's something that is imaginary, not really, not real. Think of Mr. Brown waving across, person waving at Mr. Brown. Now, here's a deep question you've always wanted to know. How could we escape? We know the easy way, right? Get loaded. How could we escape the madness that is killing us? We saw these resentments must be mastered, but how? We cannot wish them away any more than alcohol. I mentioned in 552, it mentions praying away resentments for 15 days, but I don't got time like that. If I can't wish away the resentment, how can I pray one away? I got to take this action. I need to always be in the realm of 6 and 7. Always be in the realm of 6 and 7, letting stuff go, letting stuff go. And what leads me to 6 and 7? What's the key? What's the door? 4 is the key. 5 is the door opening. 6 is going in all the time and staying there. I might have to go in there when I go inside. I might have to go make an amends. But we must change. And that part of us changing is unlearning what we think we're right about, and unlearning of what we taught, and realize that, hey, maybe I was wrong. Look what it says here. This was the course, our course. We realized the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. That's that spiritual malady, right? Though we did not like their symptoms, that's column 2. And the way they disturbed us, column 3, that's our instincts. They, like ourselves, were sick too. That's column 4. They, like ourselves, were selfish too. They, like ourselves, were self-seeking too. Instincts in collision. When we ask, we pray. This is a prayer. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person's offended, we say to ourselves, and this is something we never thought of before, this is the anger prayer. We say to ourselves, This man is sick. How can I be helpful to him? God saving me from being angry, that will be done. That's the anger prayer. Short to the point. This is a sick man. But if I'm sick, I can't see someone else is sick. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat sick people that way. If we do, we share our chances of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will help us show how to take a kindly and tolerant view of each and every one. So if a person has, let's say, dementia and forgets your name, do you get angry at them? If a person's going through a round of chemo and they have to cancel on you, do you get mad at them? If they call off? No, you treat them with compassion. You ask them, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? Tolerance, pity, and patience. We will be confronted by people who are cruel, who treat us wrongly. What if we look at those the same way with the compassion we just talked about? Is that possible? Yes. If a person is rude, can you have compassion for them and look at them as a sick person? That's what they're saying here. But the problem is, if we are not aware that we're sick, we can't see it in them. It doesn't stand out like a broken nose. There's no medical diagnosis. I guess there is one, right? But our response to them is what our instincts train us to do, what our instincts tell us to do. To react, to harm, to be an asshole, whatever it is. So can I have compassion for someone who's spiritually sick? The only way we can gain compassion for someone who has wronged us is if first not harming them, is to instead say this person's sick before I harm them. That's the change in the mindset achieved through inventory, through this awareness. That's the unlearning. From that, we come into the awareness of misdirected instincts, and we see that we're spiritually sick. And when we have that awareness, we gain compassion for the sick as well. They stand out. And when we become aware of spiritual sickness in ourselves, we react to those who are spiritually sick with compassion. And that will only go deeper when you start living in 9, 10, 11, 12. And so some people ask me, what's the difference between empathy and compassion? Empathy would be when I'm still drinking and I look out and I see a guy drunk. Oh, that guy's drunk. But compassion is when you're spiritually awake and you see that homeless guy, or you see that person, that pain in their eyes, and you know where that pain comes from because you have it too. That's compassion. That's what I'm talking about. And the best way to experience compassion is by relating what that person is going through, and that's a deep awareness of our instincts. When we have that compassion, you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes because emotionally you've been there before. You know it. I'm going to close with a story. We'll go into a little meditation, but this story is a really cool one. So every morning, this guy goes to his grandma's house, and his grandma's kind of like a Buddha. She's like, this always has an answer for stuff, and she's known as the person everyone goes to. So he goes to his grandma's house to get her wisdom, and she can always calm him down. And one morning, he's just pissed off, and he's real angry, and it's all over his face. And his grandma soon's realizing that her words of wisdom are not going to work with him today. So she gives him a visual, and she puts 3 pots of water on the stove. The first one, she puts into the pot a handful of carrots. The next one, 1 egg. And the third pot, ground coffee beans. Once they come to a boil, she puts the carrots into a bowl. She puts the egg in 1 bowl, and she filters the ground coffee into a cup so it's liquid. And she says, look, son, the carrots went in hard and strong, but when they were faced with the obstacle of boiling water, they became soft and weak. The eggs went in soft inside, but when faced with an obstacle of the boiling water, they became hard inside. But the ground coffee beans, when they faced the obstacle of the boiling water, they changed the water itself. So the moral is, when faced with an obstacle such as anger, how do you respond? Are you hard and strong, but anger makes you soft and weak? Are you soft inside, but anger makes you hard-hearted? Or when you face the obstacle of anger, do you have the strength within to overtake and change everything about it? Instead of the anger altering you, you alter the anger. That's what this is about. Step 4, we begin the transition of changing the obstacle itself instead of it changing you. And so let's just go in a little meditation, just kind of taking everything we just went over a little bit. And just close your eyes, and we're not trying to reflect on bad stuff. But think of the most unique feature of anger is that it insists on others to blame. It blinds us from the truth, convinces us that we're these innocent victims of the wrongdoings of others. You know, it makes us believe it's the way of strength, but it's the ultimate weakness. Telling us that the weapon of revenge on those, bring the weapon of revenge on those who harmed us. Return an eye for an eye. See how it's a double-edged sword. That's why it destroys more people than anything else. We must let it go to be free. Let your words end conflict instead of pain. Seek not to change the world, seek to change yourself so you can perceive it differently. And every step bring you closer to freedom. And it's then you let love fill your heart, and you will discover it's impossible to be offended by the beliefs of others. And that demolishes our limitations. I'll say with this: if you know happiness, you could bring happiness wherever you go. You can bring joy wherever you go. If you know wisdom, you can bring truth wherever you go. If you can bring peace, harmony follows. So you know calmness and serenity is everywhere. If we have patience, we know calmness. If we know gratitude, we welcome strangers and not push them away. If we have appreciation for those who love us, we found a way out. If we know compassion, then we can overcome anger. If you know love, then you can love everything, and you've always had that. But if you know awakening, we can have freedom. And if you know freedom, we break the chains. You don't have to be controlled by what you think people anymore. We never were. Instead of harming, we discover harmony. So just add the O-N-Y to harm. God, help me be free of anger and see the world through your eyes. Help me show those I resent the same tolerance, pity, and patience I would cheerfully grant a sick friend. Help me resolutely look for my own mistakes so I can understand where I've been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. Amen. So next week, we will go further into sex conduct. I'm going to stop this.